Is this what you do in your husband's house? Mind you, I'm like 7 years old and those words are seared in my brain, dragging you out for a hypothetical, non-existent man that you're probably decades away from meeting. If you grew up in an African household, or in my case, specifically a Nigerian household, you know exactly what I mean. There's a specific kind of woman that the Nigerian culture has worked very hard to keep producing for generations. This type of woman does not complain. She doesn't challenge. She doesn't truly have needs. She makes herself small enough to be loved and useful and agreeable enough. This type of woman, in my opinion, is raised to be a product and not really a person. That's why when we see women being asked to prove their worth, it usually comes in some form of domestication, some form of skill that proves something. Can she cook? Can she clean? Does she want children? Can she have children? And this is because a large part of her womanhood has been tied to her ability to produce, her ability to serve others, to cater to others' needs, and not have full agency of her life or her decisions, because her husband is supposed to hold some, if not most of that. This video is for women who were consciously and unconsciously taught that a large part of their existence was to serve their future husbands. And women who are encouraged to stifle parts of their natural character, their curiosity, their stubbornness, their ability to question authority, all of these things that we were told that we needed to fix because a man wouldn't want them. Because if you don't escape the trap of centering men in every aspect of your reality, you might leave this world with no idea who you actually are. Let's talk about where it came from. For many of our mothers and definitely our great-grandmothers and our grandmothers, the world looked fundamentally different from what it looks like right now. A woman's survival was largely dependent on the men in her life. Economic independence wasn't a given. The right to own property wasn't a given. The ability to leave a bad marriage with your dignity and with some type of financial standing wasn't a given. So in a world like that, centering men or making yourself palatable to men wasn't really weakness. It was more so a matter of survival. It was strategy. It was how you ate. Hyper submission, swallowing your needs, keeping the peace. These were all survival tools. And it took me a long time not to think of them as personality flaws, because I think that's what a lot of us are tempted to do. And the tragedy in all this is they handed us those tools because nobody handed them anything different. And a lot of us didn't have to be explicitly told what to do. We just watched our mothers. We watched our mothers bend over backwards and consistently neglect their own needs, to the point that we thought that this is what a woman was supposed to do. This is what a woman was supposed to be. This is the role of a woman. We watched them keep the peace and stay silent, because that was how you got a man and kept a man. And that was how they guaranteed safety and security for themselves and their children, because that's what a good woman was supposed to do. And because they were first examples of womanhood, we obviously took notes. But here's the problem. They handed us these tools and most of us took them without ever asking, does this still apply to my life? Does this apply to the world that we live in today? Do these tools contribute to me thriving as a human being and as a woman? And I can't fully blame us either. Most of us come from cultures and even religions where that kind of questioning isn't encouraged. We follow the status quo because that's just how things are. We don't stop to take stock of what we're actually seeing with our own eyes and ask ourselves, do I truly want this? Or is it just what I was trained to want? We pretty much inherited the behaviors without inheriting the same conditions that made them necessary. This is what happens when you've been conditioned from childhood that male validation or male attention is survival. And then you carry that belief to a world where survival is no longer on the line. I know this is not the case for every woman in every part of the world or every part of Africa. I know that some women still have to rely on men for survival. But for many of us, we live in a different world now. We have options that our mothers and our great-grandmothers just didn't have. And yet, we're still cooking to prove our worth. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with cooking for someone you love. But you know exactly what I mean. We're still shrinking our personality so that men won't find us difficult. We're still putting other women down to appear as the least feminist, most agreeable option. Still tolerating harm and calling it grace. The cost of this has been real. We center men in ways that quietly hollow us. And I know we all know more than one woman where we've seen it live, but it's no longer about survival, at least not like our moms and our grandmothers. Okay, so how do you actually do the work? How do you begin to unlearn ways of being that may not even belong to you, but belong to the women before you? And I think the place to start is genuine curiosity about yourself. Just curiosity. When you find that you make yourself smaller for a partner, or for, even if it's not a partner, ask yourself why. When you suppress your needs constantly and consistently, when you perform agreeableness or domesticity, ask yourself why. Why am I doing this, and who is it actually for? Because if we're being honest, underneath all of it is fear. Fear of abandonment. Fear that if you stop performing, or if you stop being easy, you become a real human being who has actual needs. You'll find out that most of these relationships are just transactional, but it's also data. It's data about what you believe your worth is outside of what you can offer or do for a man. For a lot of us, the work is also figuring out what to do with our mothers. Because when you start to unlearn these things, when you start to push back on all of these things that you were taught growing up, it can almost feel like there's a resistance there. To them, it may start to feel like judgment or betrayal, or maybe you think that you know more than them. But I want to be really clear when I say this. Acting, living, and choosing differently from your mother is not a betrayal. It's more so recognizing that her decisions were shaped by the world that she grew up in. And you get to do something different in the world that you have and the world that you live in right now. You can hold compassion for that, but still put down what has been handed to you. Your mother didn't have it. Your grandmother didn't have it. But you have information they didn't have. You have options that they didn't have. And you have the ability to move in a way that they never could. We were raised for a husband's house, but we get to decide what kind of woman lives in ours. All right, y'all, I hope this turns some wheels for some of us. But before you go, I need to know, what are some things that the women in your life told you growing up that were clearly for your husband and not for you? Drop them in the comments, because I know I'm not the only one. All right, I'll see you in the next one.